Welcome one, welcome all to the most significant day of racing. We already had Monaco in the morning, which Charles Leclerc won in Formula One. We also have the Indy 500, which looking a little bit rainy right now, a little bit dicey if they'll even race today. And Kyle Larson is taking a part of the Indy 500, and he's also going to be taking part, hopefully, this one is actually very much up in the air, the Coca-Cola 600. So the Coca-Cola 600 here, we're going to be able to get this race in tonight. The Indy 500 is really the one that you're going to be wondering, will they race today at all? The Coke 600 could have its own weather concerns, though, a little bit later on in the race. But the most important thing is, will Kyle Larson be there? How will he treat the Indy 500? He has said the Indy 500 is a priority, they just said. So I think that will be very significant news to kind of watch and lead up to. But obviously the longest race on the NASCAR calendar, 600 miles, 400 laps of, just 1.5 mile track here. So should be a good time. And I'm joined as always by Statsational. Stats, how are you doing today, man? And did you watch any of the races today or planning on watching the Indy 500 at all?
I'm going to be traveling after this, so I'll be listening. I did not watch that race this morning. I watched the Xfinity last night, which was pretty interesting. That was a pretty good, or yesterday afternoon, I guess it was. Which was a good race. But yeah, I'll be at my destination in time for the Coke 600, so I'll be able to watch that one in full. But I'm going to miss Indy. Maybe, who knows? Maybe they'll race tomorrow.
Yeah, that's my hope, is that they move it to tomorrow. Just give Kyle Larson plenty of time to just focus on NASCAR tonight. That's huge news. Like, it's kind of funny where the best driver in the series, I think Kyle Larson is the best. Doing the double, 1,100 miles in one day. It's a very interesting thing that I really want to touch upon when we go over the studs here. Is like, if he races today, like if they even get the Indy 500 in, that's 500 miles after. Then he's got to travel all the way to Charlotte. Then he's got to go ahead and get in the car again. Do you think that can affect someone's performance, or are you just saying, screw it, he's the best there is right now, you might as well just click his name?
I mean, I would imagine it does affect you a bit, but if anyone's going to be able to anyone will be able to overcome it, it's going to be Kyle Larson. I don't think he needs as much of prep at the track as these other guys may need. So listen, NASCAR would love nothing more than to watch him go win an Indy and then come here and win. No one's ever done it. I think Tony Stewart had a couple of top 10s in the same day. I think Tony Stewart did it. That's probably the best performance anyone's ever had. That was my logic behind, if the weather wasn't an issue, they were talking about, will he be able to make it here in time? And I'm like, dude, NASCAR will wait for him to get it. If he's 10 minutes out, like they're waiting for him, because nobody markets in any sport like NASCAR can market itself. And the last thing they're going to do is leave out their best driver trying to pull off something historic. So from that aspect, NASCAR is going to push for this thing and push for Larson to get in there. But the weather, who knows? Like I said, that becomes a bit of a wild card. I was looking at the weather. I wasn't even thinking about it for the racing earlier. I was looking at how bad an MLB slate, trying to figure out what the weather is going to be on MLB, which is always a fun exercise. So I was looking at that, and right before we went on the air, I'm like, let me check what the weather is going to be here for this race. And yeah, so I mean, you got to take into account Indy. We've got a lot more factors involved in this one than we normally do for NASCAR. So it's going to be interesting. But I think I'm going to, for now, we're at noon Eastern time. We got 6 hours and change until the race time. I'm just going to play it at least right now for as if he's in there, and I'm just going to go with it from there. We'll have plenty of time to figure out whether or not he's going to be racing, what the weather looks like. So we'll adjust as the day goes on.
Yes, plenty of time to read and react. We will definitely be on top of that news. And other than that, we got a typical 1.5 mile track here. It actually provided really good racing. I love the trucks race. I love the Xfinity race. Both great finishes, by the way. And I knew when Chase Elliott, when they got that late caution there, I'm like, Chase Elliott's going to win this race. And I wanted to live bet it. And immediately DK had him at minus 250. I was like, oh, man, that's a little too dicey to take a chance on 40 laps left. But
he played the strategy. He played that strategy, and it worked out. So he definitely didn't have the best car.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing too, is I always get frustrated when I'm watching Xfinity where more teams don't save a set for the end. Like he sacrificed, stage 1 and 2, which doesn't matter for him. Yeah, obviously, he's not racing for points or anything like that. Not racing for any playoff points at all. In the stages. So sacrificing your outlook for those, lap 30, lap 60 or whatever, lap 45, lap 90, and then being able to kind of drive the car all the way home, with fresh tires was just a major advantage. And you saw how much that can affect the race. And same thing with Corey Heim on Friday, obviously getting DQ'd, but those fresh tires almost had him up there to Nick Sanchez, who ended up winning that race. So tires, little important here. Obviously being a very, very long race, we do want to tend to lean toward the vets here. You also got multiple lanes, so you can rip the high line, you can ride the low line, or you can be in the middle. So, and honestly, I'm very excited to see how this plays out. But go ahead and give your breakdown here of Charlotte.
Yeah, so I think we kind of touched on it. We got 600 miles, which is the longest race of the year. That's going to be 400 laps, so obviously a lot more dom points than typical at a 1.5-mile track. And this is a race where we'll see some wrecking. We'll see some carnage in a race like this. The total for number of cautions is higher than it is for any other non-restricted plate speedway type of race. So we're anticipating quite a few wrecks, quite a bit of cautions. And like you said, we could run different lines here, which always makes it more interesting. Those are the tracks where we're going to see more accidents happen, especially late, because when these guys get 2 and 3 wide, that's where things get a little dicey. So we saw a bit of that yesterday in Xfinity. I don't think that's going to be different here. So I think what we have to do is maybe leave a little bit more salary than we would. What we've seen here is place differential is hugely important, but also the pole sitter has been really, really good at accumulating laps led. Now, where they finish is going to be a question, but we have seen guys here pick up quite a few laps led, and the pole sitter is typically the one that gets a lot of those early laps over the second position starter. So look for Ty Gibbs, maybe to lead a bunch of laps at a cheap price. We'll get to him, but that's kind of the layout. And then if you want to look at tracks to compare it to, it's basically Darlington and Kansas really show those are two of the tracks that correlate the best here, both 1.5 miles. So that's kind of the layout, what we're looking at for this race. And let's break it down. I actually drove this track. I was lucky enough. Yeah. With DraftKings, was it DraftKings? Yeah, I think it was DraftKings with, we had a live final for NBA in Charlotte, and I got to drive the track, which was a lot of fun.
Do they give you a race car?
You do, yeah. You're in a race car first. It was it depended on which way you went, but I got to drive with a professional first, and they hugged the wall. You're not allowed to do that, and
I can see why.
Yeah, you got to ride down on the white line, but you can't obviously go below the white either, and that would have been scary to do, man. When you're actually on these tracks, it's insane. I've never drove. That was the only time I've ever driven a car before on a track like that. I mean, the banking is like this, and if you get below that white line, I mean, the track is then flat. I don't want to know. They're like, that's when you're going to wreck. They're like, you will wreck the car if you get down there, because at the speeds that you're going, yeah, I think we got up to like 130 miles an hour with the Pro. We were up to like 180 miles per hour. It's pretty sick. It's a lot of fun. So that was a great experience.
I was wondering, I was at 180, so that makes sense. Yeah, as Tyler Ankrum, he got turned into that flat part of the track and then ended up running it into the wall.
Yeah, they warn you a lot. They're like, do not go below that white line or you will wreck.
Oh, no kidding. That is very, very fun. And we got a lot of drivers to talk about. I think this is the season high. I think we only had 38 for Daytona. Did we have 40 for Daytona? We might have, but
I can't remember now. Yeah,
we have 40 tonight, which obviously I think that's the largest that NASCAR will have this season. They don't go above 40 at all. So what we do have is a few more extra, PD spots, a couple extra drivers as well. So it'll be very interesting to see how this all shakes out. I'm going to share my screen, and we are going to be using SaberSim today. Again, code RPS15, 15% off your first payment here. And we also have NASCAR only package, or racing only package. You might have missed out on F1 earlier today, which we have a bunch of RPS logos in first place on the single entry stuff. But Bottas beat Pierre Gasly in points for fantasy production. So we didn't get the top chop. But we did get a little bit of a chop in those single entry contests. And we also have plenty of other sports today. If you don't know, the NBA is going on, the NHL is going on. We got you covered from top to bottom, as well as baseball, which has been on fire of late. Stats, you guys have been absolutely crushing baseball right now. And you think, SaberSim's got to be a major part of that, right?
So I was just going to give a lot of the credit to SaberSim. I've been messing around with Saber with the Sims and kind of incorporating what I've been doing for years in baseball and using the Sims with that. It's been remarkable. We took down 50K yesterday on the the early slate.
Yep.
Got close again last night. We've had a lot of that have come close. Took the monster down last week on quite a nice run here, taking down a few GPPs plus the monster in the last couple of weeks since starting to use Saber a lot more. So I'm really happy now that I really, it took me some time to really start to learn Saber, but I think it's well worth it. And then of course, if you are part of RPS, you come into our Discord and there's plenty of help there with Saber. But I think using the Sims is invaluable. I think it's giving you a leg up on the fields in these GPP tournaments.
100%. It's been very, very nice to see the MLB content absolutely thriving. We've had big hits from members all season long, including coordinators too. So you had DC win 25K last night or yesterday. Yesterday, you said the early slate. He won 25K on DraftKings. You have had Boynton, who's been killing it. You guys from top to bottom. AP. Once I start naming names, I want to name everyone, but just off the top of my head, it's been great to see. Let's go ahead and get into this slate here. We're going to talk about the studs. 10K and up here. We're going to go over these 4 drivers here. We've already said our piece a little bit on Larson, but we'll go back to him again here. There's a chance that he might not even race. So again, be sure to be kind of keeping track of what the Indy 500 decides and what Kyle Larson does too. We'll have that news updated in our Discord as soon as we can when we want to get tweeted out, hopefully. But you also have guys like Denny Hamlin starting 1 spot behind him. You got William Byron starting 2nd, and then Ryan Blaney starting in the mid-teens here. This is a very interesting range because Byron starting right next to Gibbs, you maybe think, can he get the lead early? But, I mean, they have the same odds to win. They were both very similar in practice. And you said it earlier, like the pole has a lot of benefit here. If Byron doesn't get the lead, well, what differentiates him from Larson, Hamlin, or Blaney? So it's a very, very interesting range. I'm curious to hear who you're going to say. But out of these 4, who is your favorite?
My favorite's going to be Larson. I mean, I hate to jump on the chalkiest guy out here, but I actually think we're going to get under. Let's just assume, obviously, that he's racing. I think you're gonna for once. I think you could actually get him at a fairly reasonable ownership compared to where we expect him to finish, just because of all these factors. So I'm anticipating his ownership to be a little lower than it should be. So I want to be over the market on Larson, which I think if you get to that, 45%, I think kind of gets you there. I don't think he's going to be as owned. Where do we have him over in Saber as far as ownership levels?
So let's see what SaberSim has, because I haven't done the ownership projection just yet. They have him at 26% right now, which is really low for Larson.
I think that's real. Yeah, I think it's real low. I think maybe he comes in a little higher, maybe 30%. But I think if you can get up into the 40s, I think you're going to be in good shape there. I mean, we get a decent starting position. His practice times were phenomenal. I think, listen, we could give you all the we really don't have to talk much about Larson. Yeah. He is the best. But the thing that you worry about here is he's kind of at the 1.5 miles. It's kind of been all or nothing. So, which you don't mind in the GPP. Give me all or nothing. Give me a win or not, because he's really going to have to finish up at the top and get you some lead laps most likely. But even the 11K is not too crazy a price for him here. So I like being over more. I really like all the guys above 10K, to be honest with you. Denny Hamlin, he's been the 1B to Larson's 1A all year. You're looking at Hamlin starting 11th. Again, just basically, it's the same play as Larson. He's going to have to pretty much finish if Larson's going to be the winner in the winter, Hamlin's going to have to basically match whatever we're expecting from Larson. That means, get up into the top 2 or 3, lead a bunch of laps. And that's going to do it for Hamlin. If you look at what he did at Darlington, 4th place finish, 5th place finish, he's been in contention here. It seems like every week at all of these tracks. He is the veteran that we're looking for at a track like this at 600 miles. someone who can maybe, kind of conserve tires a bit. Denny is going to be that guy. He's won here before. Just last year, I don't know if he wrecked. He must have wrecked because he had a 35th finish here in 23. But before that, he won this race in 22, a second place finish back in 2020, and seventh place. So, I mean, obviously, he is. And if you go even further back, his track history is phenomenal here. So I do like Denny. I think Blaney is a guy who may be getting a little bit overlooked, starting 16th. The Fords, again, it's been a common theme all year. I didn't mention it earlier, but as far as the betting markets go, your Hendricks and JGR are going to be your two favorites here. And because of that, of course, the Chevys and the Toyotas are also the betting favorites. So the Ford's not really getting a lot of love in the betting market for obvious reasons. But you got Blaney here in the Penske Ford. Starting 16th. I think he's going to be the least owned of these guys in the 10K range. And I like Blaney as well. Again, will possibly be a kind of an all or nothing. He won this race last year. So I think we have, his practice times in his long run speed was much better. And I think that's what we're looking for in this race. I would prefer long run speed over the short run. And he had good long run speed this week. So I think if he can avoid getting himself into trouble, I think Blaney can have a strong finish here as well. So I'm going to be over market on basically Larson, Hamlin, Blaney, and then Byron is, you mentioned it, starts second. This is the tricky part. Byron, he had a real fast car in practice, but he wrecked, did not wreck, right? He had, did he wreck in practice, or he had some issues because he didn't run for long?
Yeah, I think it was issues because it wasn't a wreck. I didn't see him. No fear of a backup car or anything like that. I think
he doesn't have the backup car today. But yeah, I know that much. But I think he had some issues there. But he ran really, really fast short term. We don't know what this car looks like maybe on the long runs, but on the short runs, he looked he was the fastest car on the short runs, which perhaps that gets him out to the lead starting second. We know that the pole position historically has been the spot that has led the most laps, but there's no reason that we can't get Byron out of the gates here quick and lead a bunch of early laps. But at that second spot, he's going to have a strong finish, not just lead a lot of these laps. But I do like him as well over Mark. I just think his history here pretty good as well. History on 1.5 mile tracks this year has been strong. Second place finish here last year. I like Byron as well to get. I like a lot of the high price guys. Maybe it's going to be a bad thing for me, but the way my lineups are kind of shaken out when I did it this morning was, it was a lot of the higher price guys with a lot of the cheaper guys. And I don't necessarily love the cheaper guys. It's just that I like these high price guys this week.
Yes, very much so here. It's very easy to like the top guys up top. Like, I really do think, if Larson's going to race today, you got to have him, in there, especially if he's going to be at deflated ownership. Because right now, if you look at DraftKings, he's got a questionable tag on it. And that always deflates ownership just a bit. Like, if you're hand building a team or you're not sure if you're going to be able to, see to the end of the game by chance or anything like that, or at end of the race, if you're not around for lock and stuff, a lot of people might click away from Larson's name. I just babbled there for a second. I apologize. But, there is news, right? Like, he does say that he is prioritizing the Indy 500 today. So if there was a significant delay, just expect him to stay at the Indy 500. So, Jake, he said the Indy 500 is a priority. How many NASCAR races are in their year? There's only one Indy 500. So, he's kind of noted on that. But, yes, I think that the Indy 500 might have a chance of just being postponed tomorrow. But again, we will have that news for you, hopefully, as soon as possible. Paul Kress will tweet it out, Chris Knight, whoever is there, we'll have all the information. Jeff Gluck, I think, is the one who's in the Indy 500 there, covering Larson pretty extensively. So we'll have that news hopefully by then. But yes, I am with you. I think Larson's 1. I think Hamlin's 2, and then Blaney 3. The problem for me is that I am going to be very high on Ty Gibbs. So if I'm high on Ty Gibbs, Byron's one who I kind of have to leave out, right? Like, I think Gibbs can lead the first part of this race. He's very cheap. He blends in with a lot of builds that you might really, really like. So I will be gravitating away from Byron for that reason, because I already have a Dominator who I can play at 8,300. I don't really want to commingle them together. I don't want to play 1 and 2, especially at this race where, I know there's 600 miles. I know there's 400 laps. But I still want to be able to get a little bit of PD points. And Larson and Hamlin and Blaney, what if Byron didn't lead that first stint? Well, there you go. They have, a ceiling 8 points higher, even a floor of 8 points higher in terms of what they can do to move up the pack if they happen to win the race. And Byron could even fall back in the pack. Like, we don't know what that car can do in the long run. I do think it is promising, though. It is a Hendrick. We know what they're going to do. Like Chase Elliott, Byron, Bowman, and Larson, they're all going to be good on the long run, I think. So I'm not really worried about the long run of it, but I do worry about these other cars catching up to him. And I think he's just a better guy to gravitate away from here. Blaney, I'm with you. 10-3, not too bad. Like, if you gave me a top 5 finish there, told me I had a dominator somewhere in my team like Gibbs, it's a perfect fit. He can absolutely, win this race because he has done it before, but also just the fact that he's got enough upside there to where if he moves up to 5th, gets you 55 DK, 60 DK, what if he did fluke, a strategy call or something like that, where all of a sudden he led 50 laps? Or what if he did just drive it up to the lead? I think there's a lot of chances that could give Blaney the optimal here. Hamlin and Larson, though, I would prefer straight up. Let's go ahead and move into the 9K range now. This is it's helmed by the Toyotas almost, because you got Christopher Bell, you got Martin Truex Jr., you got Tyler Reddick, and then you have the one Hendrick car of Chase Elliott. All these guys starting inside the top 8, with the exception of Joey Logano, who we will talk about a little later on. I don't know why I thought he was 9K then. Of all these guys starting inside the top 8, I look at it, Truex is definitely my favorite here. If you wanted a free core play here, I think Tony is the big T cord Martin Truex Jr. here today. So that is very interesting to see how he might think that this race shakes out. He might be very high in the Toyotas. Who knows? But you also have Tyler Reddick, Chase Elliott, and Christopher Bell here. When I see this range stats, for me, it's Martin Truex Jr. number 1. But I'm starting to like Chase Elliott a little bit more. And I think Reddick and Bell are the kind of ones who I'm kind of shoving to the side a little bit. What about you?
Yeah, I like Truex. I sprinkled in some Truex in the betting markets to win this race. I think what's going to happen, you're going to look at he's had good history here, but recently in the next gen cars, not as good. And a lot of that has to do with his qualifying. He hasn't qualified well here, and now he qualifies 4th. I think he's going to be sneaky. I think he's going to be a little overlooked by some people. So I like the big T call of coring Truex Jr. I think we got potential for him to lead a bunch of laps. He's done it before, and I think that can happen here again. And I'll go back to 600 miles at this track. I like some of the veteran guys here who can maybe conserve some tires, play it a little bit smarter. Truex is as good as it gets in that realm. So I do like in this range for sure. I like Truex. Reddick, I don't know if you mentioned it. He's got to start. He's starting 8, but he's got to start in the back and have a pass-through penalty. So he might be a lap down before we even get this thing going. So that's going to be a big problem for Reddick. That's going to suppress a lot of his ownership. So he's already starting relatively high in the 8th spot. Then he's got to start back with that pass-through penalty. He's got a lot of traffic to get through. He's got 600 miles, of course, to get up and try to win this race. Certainly possible on a track that we can pass at. But this is he may have to push it really hard. I think it increases his chances of wrecking in this race. So I'd be very cautious here playing Reddick. I think a lot of people will be, of course, because of that and where he's going to be starting. For my GPPs, I think I'm going to be right around the market in the 10 to 15% range. If you don't want to play him at all, I could totally understand that as well and be a straight fade on Truex. I think you had Elliott. We mentioned he won yesterday, and it was more of, like we said, it was more of a strategy win, I think, than necessarily the car. But obviously, listen, Chase is one of the better drivers in Cup. I just think he may be, he's starting 5th, which we don't necessarily love here. He's going to have to lead some laps. I'm going to be a little underweight on Elliott. This is a range where I'm not as high. Like I said, I kind of like the guys over 10K more than I like this 9K range. And then you have Bell, which has been, he qualifies 3rd. Can we really trust him? With all the issues that he's had with the pit crew. like I don't know if we could trust Bell to get out there. He's gonna again where these guys are all starting fairly close to the front, and they're gonna have to get us some. They're gonna have to get strong finishes as well as lead some laps for me. And so Bell not going to be high. I think Bell's probably the lowest owned with Reddick. They're going to be right around the bottom in this range. Truex will get some ownership, and I think Elliott right behind that.
Yes, very much. Truex definitely my favorite here. Like you were mentioning, I like the fact that you sprinkled him in the betting markets. I do like that. And yes, I did completely overlook. I had it in my notes here. I said Tyler Reddick serving a penalty here, so he's going to have to do a pass through. I really wonder if he'll go a lap down. And even then, could they get an early caution that could prevent that? Because the stages are a lot longer here. I mean, that is something to kind of note. The stages, these aren't your typical, 45 laps or, 90 laps in some instances. Like, you're going to have, it's not like
it's 4-1. I think we got 4 100 lap stages today.
Yes. So we have multiple of those where, JJ Yaley's sitting 40th, right? He could easily be lapped. All of a sudden, that's kind of trapping him. Or, who if someone, let's just say, for example, Ty Dillon, right? All of a sudden someone who just gets ahead of him there. All of a sudden it could be anyone. Todd Gilliland gets lapped in the first stage. Like you could have someone where he's having to compete with, and then he wouldn't even be able to get dominator points until like stage 3 at the minimum. And that would be even like on the good side where it's like, he was able to manage to kind of skate his way back up into the pack. I don't love the outlook here for Tyler Reddick with that penalty here. And I very much would rather gravitate toward Truex, Elliott, or Bell even. But even then, I'm not high on Bell. Truex is the one guy who I really just stands out in this range. And Chase, I'm going to be okay with him. I know that you're not on him a ton. I'll be okay with him just because, which is rare. I'm never okay with him, and you're not. I'm going to be very fine with him in terms of if he's a last piece. I'm going to make dominator groups to where it's like at most 3, though, or at most 2, I should say. I think I'm going to have to not include Larson and Hamlin in that group. But really, I don't want multiple guys starting inside the top 5. Like, I don't want to just overload, Gibbs with Truex and Elliott. No, I want, at most 2 of the 3 in the top 5, or, at most 2 of anyone inside the top 10, really, outside of Kyle Larson, I think. Let's go ahead and move down to the 8K range. Now we got Joey Logano, Brad Keselowski, Chris Buescher, Ty Gibbs, Ross Chastain, and Kyle Busch. So the one thing that really jumps off the page, this is where all the chalk is stats. You're going to have a really, really heavy chalk load for Chris Buescher, starting 39th, second to last, has absolutely shown speed in that car as well. Yep, Brad Keselowski, starting 9 spots ahead of him, can absolutely move up the pack, be able to put up a great score. Then you have your potential dominator, Ty Gibbs, starting first. What if he leads a bunch of laps? He has plus 750 to win, which is really good odds. If he was able to lead the first stage, let's say he was able to lead the whole first stage, almost looking at optimal there at that price. Then Joey Logano, who wasn't great in practice, but still starting 28th. What you have here, stats, is just so many good options. How many can you really live with for tournaments, especially in large field? Like this isn't something in the large field tournaments where, I want him, and him. Well, everyone else wants that. You're going to have a very tough time being able to get to the top. I think for single entries and cash games, sure, it's fine. I think a lot of my builds are going to start with Buescher and Keselowski and Gibbs, but all of a sudden, if I start adding in Logano, who's going to be a major chalk too, I'm just going to be dead. I'm going to be drawing dead before the race even starts in terms of getting the 100K. I think my chop would all of a sudden diminish all the way down to 10K at most. You got to be careful with that, right, Stats?
Yeah, for sure. I think if you're making cash lineups, it's a lot easier this week than necessarily the GPPs. Look, we mentioned earlier how many cautions they're expecting in a race like this with Rex. So you got to be really cautious with the chalky plays. Now I've got Buescher and Keselowski as my 2 of my core plays, and I think I think they're 2 of the best plays, maybe the best. They probably are the 2 best plays in my mind on the entire slate. But if you want to get contrarian here, I have no problem fading. I think Buescher is the one that you'd want to fade before you'd want to fade Keselowski, and I think Buescher is going to be higher owned than a Keselowski. I trust Keselowski at a track. Again, it goes back to there's certain guys I'm going to trust at this type of a track, and he fits in there. I don't really care how he looks in practice. I don't care about all that. Like Keselowski is going to protect that car. He will drive it up into the top 10. And I think, and give us a pretty strong point differential or place differential amount of points here. So I like Keselowski the best in this group. Buescher is going to be in my core just for the simple fact of where he is starting. But I think if you're going to fade either one of them, I think Buescher is the guy you want to fade. Gibbs, we talked about it. Look, the poll is strong here. That's another guy that I have no problem fitting. And now some people are going to have him as a core. I think, did you mention you were going to have him? I think Big T may have him as a core play.
Yeah.
And I totally get it. And people are going to be looking at because of how strong the poll is at this track. I'm actually leaning more towards Byron though to get those lead laps here early than I am Gibbs. Now I also, it may sound a little contrarian, I wound up taking Gibbs in the betting markets. I like the price there. I'm kind of still contemplating if I wanted to throw a Byron in there, but I think I'm going to just kind of stick to the two bets that I have because I do think there is the possibility here. Gibbs having raced yesterday, sees the track. I think Gibbs could win this race. I don't, the question mark for me with Byron is how is his long run speed? We don't quite know that yet. So obviously Gibbs can lead a bunch of laps early. I think if you're going to fade these three massive owned chalky plays, I think it's Buescher and Gibbs are the ones. I think Gibbs is probably the easiest to fade of the three because I think just more has to happen right for Gibbs. Even if he leads a bunch of laps, he gets wrecked out of this race and that's not going to matter. He leads 50, 60 laps without, finishing in the 30s. Then that's not going to get it done here for us. So I think if you're going to rank them, I like Keselowski, then Buescher, then Gibbs. Now I think Kyle Busch, I think is really interesting here. I don't know if he's getting a lot of talk right now. Starts 15th. I mean, there's nobody in this field who's had a better history at this place than Kyle Busch. I mean, even in the next gen cars, he's been phenomenal. So in the last 3 years, worst finish was 6th. He's got a 2nd and a 3rd. I mean, I think Kyle Busch is going to be a sneaky good play here. So I like Kyle Busch quite a bit at this 8K range. I know, it's not the sexiest starting position of 15th, but I think Kyle gets this car up potentially into a top 5. I haven't looked at the betting markets on the top 5, but that might be worth a bet. So I do like Kyle Busch. And then you've got Chastain. So, Chastain has in the past led laps here. I don't particularly love the starting position of 7th. He potentially could die. He's dominated before. He could be a bit of a contrarian play, get off of some of the other guys. If you're going to take some guys looking for Dom points, some of the other more chalky plays up near the top and move to a Chastain, but just not going to be high on my list this week.
Yes, and I love what you said about Kyle Busch because the first thing that happened, stats, is I looked at Kyle Busch's odds. I looked at his projection. I'm like, oh, man, he's 8K now. Like, he's kind of getting into that price range where we neglected him for, 3 months now. So we're all of a sudden, he's playable again. He's very much playable at 8K. And it goes into lines where, how do you build a NASCAR lineup, right? You don't want a million guys starting inside, the top 20 or whatever. But if you're looking for a guy who's in that mid-range who all of a sudden could pop up as optimal, because look at who he's going against, right? Let's ignore, Buescher and Keselowski and Gibbs, right? Anyone below him. All of a sudden you have Alex Bowman starting inside the top 10. Not great. You have Bubba Wallace starting 12th. Not great. Gragson, Briscoe, Barry, Suarez, McDowell. I skipped Jones because I think Jones is fine. But you're having, for me, a substantially higher projection for Kyle Busch than any of these other drivers below him. And what that is going to do, it's going to open up the door for, Kyle Busch to potentially be optimal. And Jake, you're right. We had Ricky Stenhouse being a victim to Kyle Busch's antics. As someone who locked Ricky Stenhouse, I was so pissed at Kyle Busch. But you have to have a short memory at DFS. And the fact of the matter is, stats, Ricky Stenhouse last week was almost optimal, despite getting dumped on the first lap. I was so upset by that because he was 100% the best play on the board in terms of
no doubt.
Because I did all the math. I'm sitting there. I'm like, there's no way Ricky Stenhouse isn't optimal unless he crashes on the first lap.
Yep.
Well, Kyle Busch made that happen. And I pray that Ricky Stenhouse puts Kyle Busch into the wall. But if he doesn't, Kyle Busch is going to be a fine play today and a very good play. But then again, that's why I'm not going Kyle Busch my main team. But God, I will be rooting my ass off if Stenhouse gets right on his rear and shoves him into the wall and gets proper payback. And that punch that he delivered on Kyle Busch was magnificent. I'm so happy that happened. And I hope more happens today. I didn't even get your take on that stat.
Yeah, I love it, man. It goes to me. This is not like we haven't really seen. I can't remember the last punch we saw. It's been a little while. This is taking me back to to the Dale Earnhardt senior days. I want to see this is what we want to see some good old boys messing, getting after it in the garage and just throwing some punches, man. So that was pretty good. And nobody likes Kyle Busch, so so that's always fun. A lot of the DFS world doesn't really love Stenhouse either, but Kyle Busch is just not a well-loved guy. He's kind of plays the villain role really well. So watching him get punched, I think a lot of people enjoyed that last week, but I love it, man. And then it just adds intrigue because now everyone wants to see, like you, does he put him into the wall? Does he wreck him? And he said he's not going to do that. But man, let's see if it gets it. Sometimes, it's funny how sometimes those cars wind up right next to each other. and when there's a big fight going on, there was a good fight yesterday in the, I thought it was going to get a little crazy with Smith and I'm forgetting now who it was in the race yesterday where he was giving him the finger.
It was Cole Custer and Austin Hill.
Was it Hill? Was it Custer? Yeah, it was Austin Hill. Yeah,
that was the one where Hill got very upset with Custer and just kept on the accelerator despite them both being wrecked. That was crazy, but it wasn't. I don't think it resulted in any fist fights or anything like that.
No.
We had something in the trucks race. I think that had a little bit of a spark, but the last punches I remember being thrown was Sam Mayer and Ty Gibbs in the Xfinity Series back at Martinsville a couple of years ago, and they were right next to each other midway through the late in the race yesterday. Stats. I was sitting there, I'm like, I wonder if Mayer is still thinking about churning Gibbs here.
It's fun. That's the fun of NASCAR, right? When these guys start banging into each other. May not be that fun for you in DFS, or it could work both ways. So it'll be fun. This will be good. I mean, with 600 miles, there's a good chance they're going to get next to each other at some point.
Very much so. Yeah, Rob Chastain hit Noah Gragson. I did forget that happened here. But yeah, I kind of agree. I don't think it'll happen in this race. I think it'll happen kind of on a similar short track where the risk of a major injury is a lot less too. Yes. And I don't think anyone wants to put anyone in the wall going 190. That's why the North Wilkesboro one, if you're going to dump someone at that track, I guess it's fair to do it then. But yes, it should be very interesting. But yeah, we talked about, if Kyle Busch doesn't get wrecked, look at who he's going against here in this range. Like anyone below him, he is just going to be a much better play in my eyes. And that's just him being able to hold position, but also being able to move up inside the top 10 and potentially a top 5, which could very well be in the cards here. And again, I'm high on Gibbs. I think the practice times were very good. I think they were very solid enough to where I don't expect him to win the race. But then again, he is one of the betting favorites. I think he's one of the top 5 betting favorites in this race. If you gave me 100 laps led, I will bite your hand off all day. I don't care where he finishes at that point where I'm like, I got to take the risk. And I think that he's going to be able to lead the first stint in this race. Hopefully more. Being the pole position stats is something I didn't do my full research on. Does he have the pit box?
I don't know if he's got the pit box. I haven't looked at that. But the last 15, I believe the last 15 pole sitters here have led at least double-digit laps. So that, again, it does bode well for the pole sitter.
Very much. And yes, and like you said, Buescher is going to be major chalk. Keselowski's going to be major chalk. I'm actually going to be hopping off Logano a little bit. It is more because he's the most pricey of those 3 PD plays up there. I think he's a very good play. I think he's a lock in cash, but I'm gravitating a little bit away from Joey Logano in terms of, does he have the upside to kill me? Do I really see a top 10? I'm struggling to see if he is able to get into the top 10. I don't. I'd rather have Keselowski straight up, and that's kind of where the issue kind of comes in the fold. But if you're landing on Logano as the last piece, you're very much fine there. Let's go ahead and move on down to the 7K range here. We got, like I said, a terrible range. You got every one of these drivers starting inside the top 20, besides Eric Jones starting 34th. I'm not going to be playing Daniel Suarez. I'm going to be unchecking that box. I'm not even going to let you talk about his stats. I just uncheck that box there. But Daniel Suarez, complete fade. Briscoe, I guess, can be fine. Gragson can be fine. They got to hold position. They got to improve position to be optimal because they're not 6K anymore. Gragson specifically is now 7.5. That's getting up there in price. Bubba Wallace, 7.7. I think he can be fine. And then you have Alex Bowman at 7,800 starting 6th. Like, I don't get excited for this range, but I do want to get your opinion on Eric Jones specifically too, because I keep kind of landing on him in that awkward range. And we do get confirmation from Izzy B that Gibbs does have pit stall 1, which was a pretty big factor in the race and the Xfinity race a little bit. Like, Custer was able to kind of launch back into the mix a few times there.
Yeah. So when we look at this range, like I said, thank you, Izzy, for looking that up. But when we look at the range, it's all about Jones. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, there's a lot of guys here that I don't necessarily want to play. So for me, I mean, you look at Jones, he's starting 34th. He's going to be one of the higher owned guys, going to be in a lot of people's core plays, looking for that place differential. He came back a couple of weeks ago. He was hurt, looks fine now. I'm just looking at his history here, or his history at the intermediate tracks, and it's pretty good. I mean, he's gotten the top 20 in the 3 races that he's had in all of those. So, I think if he gets us into the top 20, top 15 for sure, we should be in pretty good shape. So I do like Jones here at the price tag of 7,200 in the Toyota. We've got a bunch of Fords here in this range as well. I don't, not really loving much else in this price range. I think Bowman, you can kind of toss out. I just don't see starting 6th. Just not seeing the upside for Bowman. I think Bubba Wallace, Bubba at these 1.5-mile tracks has done well, but I think, again, starting 12th, I don't know what we could expect. What's our upside on Bubba? I just don't know if there's enough there. Certainly better than Bowman. We're getting a little bit better place differential. I don't know how many laps we can expect him to lead. And I mean, he's going to have a really, really strong finish. Definitely going to be in your GPP mix, but not one of the stronger plays. I think Gragson starting 19th, maybe a little bit better. We saw Gragson race over the weekend here as well. He's run well in equipment that Amarola had last year, right? I think Gragson's kind of coming into his own, but still, I'm not really going to be high on him. I'm looking more towards the veteran type of drivers in this race. So Gragson, not going to be high on my list. Briscoe as well starts 18th. I think you can almost fade Briscoe if you want to play him in GPPs. Go ahead, but he's close to a fade for me. Really more of a short track guy. Suarez, I think you mentioned. You could fade Suarez, or definitely going to have just a sprinkle of him in your 150. And I think Berry's in that same situation, both starting 14th and then 13th respectively. So I really think it's all about Jones. I think you could play a bit of Gragson and Bubba, but the rest of this range just not too appetizing.
Very much so. It's just not very appetizing, really, outside of Jones. But Gragson is very much coming into his zone, so it is good to see. I do think that talent-wise, he is up there in the top of the pack, where it's like, he can very much drive this into the top 12, maybe, and perhaps be optimal at 7,500. Then I'd much prefer Kyle Busch, but then again, I wouldn't mind going to Gragson, if you had to save 500 or whatever. I'd be very fine with that. For me, it's Jones, Gragson, and then Bubba, then Briscoe, and the others I'm just completely fading for the most part in this range here. Let's see here. 6K range now. We got a bunch of drivers to talk about. We got Michael McDowell, 9th. I don't think there's going to be too much to talk about there. You also have Austin Dillon starting 27th, Ricky Stenhouse starting 23rd, Todd Gilliland starting 35th, who will be the most popular option in this range. You have Brian Preece, Carson Hocevar, Austin Cindric, and should I X him out here? Stats: Jimmy Johnson starting 29th.
Yeah, I think we're done. I don't know how he's still priced in the 6K range. I don't know,
right? He belongs in the JJ Yeley range down here. JJ Yeley absolutely crushed last race in the Xfinity Series yesterday. Was more than optimal at that point. Then you also have John Hunter Nemechek and Austin Cindric in this range down here too. So A 6K range where it's not bad. Nothing really is great here. But for me, it's Gilliland, Priest, and then it gets a little bit murky stats. And Gilliland is a person who didn't have a ton of success in practice. Like, it wasn't like he had a lightning quick car. It doesn't have a ton of history here either, but he did get 15th here in 2022, which that's promising, right? Like, what's your take on Gilliland specifically? And then you can touch on this other range.
I mean, Gilliland, he had, listen, he's finished top 15 in his last 2 mile-and-a-half races. So, I mean, we've seen some good finishes here as of late from Gilliland. He starts 35th, so that's going to get his ownership up there. The guy I like even better in this range, I like Stenhouse. If you look, Stenhouse has phenomenal history at this track. I mean, so we go back from 23 down. I mean, 7th, 7th, 12th, 4th. So really 3 out of the last 4 trips here, a top 10 with a 12th place finish. Gotta love that at this specific track. So I think Stenhouse is a strong play, 6,600. Throw the fight out. Maybe he gets a little bit more attention because of the fight. Maybe people jump on the ownership. But yeah, I think he's going to be. I think he's a very strong play down. I don't know what the. I didn't look at the ownership. What do we got on him at?
Stenhouse should be around, I'm thinking 15 to 20 at most. They got him at 11.
Yeah, so he'll be a little bit more than that. Yeah.
I think, 15 is probably the best number there. And yeah, like you said, I don't think anyone's going to gravitate towards Stenhouse because of the fight, but he definitely will get a little bit more publicity in the pre-race stuff too. So it'll be interesting there. But yeah, anyone else that you wanted to touch on here?
So, I mean, Dylan has 3. He's in his last 4 races here. He's got 3 top 10 finishes. So that's pretty good. Definitely playable. He's going to be in my player pool. Not particularly high on him. Does start 27th. We do have, we've got some upside there. I think for the rest of the guys, not really all that excited. I think McDowell's, you could just kind of leave out of your lineup starting 9th. And then the rest of this group, I'm not real high on at all. Jimmy Johnson, definitely not going to play. Cindric, don't like, starting 17th. It's really, for me, I think the only guys that I really want in my field are going to be Stenhouse, Gilliland, and Dylan in this range. Priest maybe to a degree. He could be sneaky. Does start 31st. I think you mentioned maybe you like Priest here. He does have a couple of top 20s at these mile-and-a-halves. Finished 13th here last year. So I think, Priest is another guy that you want to kind of throw in the mix at this range.
Yeah, Priest is someone who, it's more that maybe the Fords have figured something out over the last couple of weeks, right? Like, maybe the Fords are making progress. I wouldn't mind taking a chance on him there. And it's a weak range. Like, it's not like, this 8K range where I felt like there was 4 or 5 guys who could make a lineup. Like, here I see maybe 2, probably at most 2 who I'd really want on a main team, and Priest is, being one of them. So yeah, like this range here, not one that I want to get carried away with. Definitely wouldn't want multiple, I don't think, in one lineup. It'd be kind of a pick and choose. But it also brings me into my next point. Like, you go down to the 5K range, I'm talking about the 6K, and like, it's almost like a wasteland. Like, I love Van Gisbergen, but like, this is going to be a tough track. 600 miles here. You got 30. Starting 36th. You talk about it perhaps being a wreck fest. Does that bring into play guys like JJ Yaley starting 40th? I don't really think so. Then you also have Justin Haley, where he's been a horse all season. He's starting 22nd. Is the horse starting too high here? Stats.
I mean, if you look at his odds, he's by far has the best odds of anyone in this group. So I think he's got to be in the mix. Where is he now? I think he was like 100 to 1 or something like that. The last I looked at it. So, there's no one even close in this range. So I think you have to give him some consideration. Yeah. Again, as it happens in most weeks, when you get down to this range, it's going to be about, and especially here with 600 laps, you don't want one of these guys to get too far back here and be lapped and then get 2 or 3 laps off the pace, not being able to move up. And also we're going to have to deal with the wrecks. So getting this right, really getting that 5 to 7K range right. There's going to be one of these guys are going to be in. Probably one of these 5K guys make it into the winning lineup. It's a matter of which one gets in there. So I think Haley is the obvious choice of the group. He's the best option in this price range for sure. I think the rest of the guys you're just kind of sprinkling in and hoping for the best. I think Zane Smith could be a fit. There's a few of these guys that I don't mind fading just because they're starting too high, starting 25th. I think you got Hemrick starting 24th. Like a couple of those guys, I would say you want to just kind of leave out. I think the rest of these guys, like a Yelly and McLeod, you're just looking at what you're hoping for here is that they move up in Rex. The downside is, like I said, they're going to get way behind on laps, and they're not going to be able to move up. But I think you have to kind of sprinkle them into your GPPs, a few of these guys. And I'm going to be kind of field for me is going to be right around the 3 to 4, maybe 5% on a lot of these guys in my 150 builds.
Yeah, that checks out. I mean, I'd much rather go Yaley just because I think those 3 spots could matter that much. Like, I think McLeod and Yaley are going to finish right next to each other. Basically, those will be the last 2 classified cars almost. The thing with, in this range that doesn't really get me excited, just can anyone move up? And Justin Haley seems like, top 20 would be an incredible result for him. It would be great. Can I expect much more than that? And this is always the problem here with 20th place is what, 20 DK almost. I think it's 23 DK. So you would still be getting 27 fantasy points, which fine at 5,800. I think I would take it for sure, but it's not that great. It's not like a sure and me optimal. So that's where my cautiousness of Haley really comes into effect. Van Gisbergen, he doesn't even have to run that well. He can get 28th, and all of a sudden you're looking at, what is that, DK wise, 15 plus 8. Yeah, you're looking at 23, and that's with a poor run of 23rd. I wouldn't mind it. So it should be a much better time trying to guess who is going to thrive, who is not going to thrive in this range. I think SVG is my favorite. I think I'm okay with Haley being my second favorite, but this is a range that I really want to desperately avoid. I really think SVG is very, very fine for the most part. Let's go ahead and I think wrap it up here. I got my dogs barking in the background, which is supposed to happen. But let's go ahead and get your betting ones. I know you already kind of gave them away, but officially, who are your bets for today's race?
Yeah, I put in earlier. I've got Gibbs and Truex. It's been I don't know. Don't have a ton of confidence here. I think Byron was my next guy left out, so he'll probably be the one you want to bet because I'm leaving him off. But that's going to be my betting here for today.
I love it. Let's go ahead and get into our drivers of the day here. So you know the rule. Under 20% for the driver of the day. We'll use SaberSim's ownership for this one here. So basically, you're going to be missing out on all the chalk here. You're even going to be missing on Gibbs. You're going to be missing on Byron and stuff. So let's see. Who is your driver of the day under 20%?
I'm going with the guy coming off the fight, man. I'm going with Ricky Stenhouse.
I love it.
Yeah, we don't normally go Stenhouse. Not normally our guy. We know about his wreck history, but his history at this track is just too good to overlook. So I'm gonna go with Ricky here to give us a strong finish.
Perfect. I am kind of shocked that I think Gilliland's not going to be under 20%, but we got to play the game the way it's set up. We're using SaberSim's ownership. I am going to go with Todd Gilliland. I need a value. I need someone in the 6K range to save me. And Gilliland is someone who is hitting a lot of my teams here right now, 6,500. I will gladly play Todd Gilliland. I'll pair him up with Ricky Stenhouse, and then we'll go to the winner's circle together with hopefully a Kyle Larson who ends up racing in this race. So again, thank y'all for joining us. RPS 15% off your first payment. You can get SaberSim access with that discount. And you can get it for all sports, not just NASCAR here. Hopefully that if we don't ship, if it's not one of us, then it's one of y'all. Have a great rest of your day and good luck.